Paradise people, welcome back to the podcast and our radio show here at Bobo 89.1 FM. I am Bella, your host, and today we are continuing our new series called Nature Positive, which is sponsored by Sustainable Cayman. Each month we have been talking with a new guest on a different subject relating to a move towards nature positivity. Last month we met with Lisa Hurlston-McKenzie to get the 101 on climate change, and you have to make sure you go and check that one out over on our YouTube and our podcasts. This month, we are sitting down with Senior Policy Advisor for the Portfolio of Agriculture, Mr. Demoy Nash, and Planning and Environmental Lawyer, Miss Anna Russell-Nee. So, good afternoon. What is it, afternoon? It is afternoon. Good afternoon, guys. Sorry about my voice. I'm like a bit of a grouch today. But thank you for coming in and talking to us. How are you both doing?
Pleasant afternoon, Bella. I'm doing well. Thank you for the invite.
Good.
I'm also doing well. Thank you for having us both.
Good. Awesome. Wonderful. So, you guys are both two people with a lot of experience in a lot of different things from very different places, which I love, but coming together to talk about the subject of food and farming kind of here in Cayman. So I want to get to know you a bit better, other than what I've read online. So let's start, ladies first, with you, Anna. You are a planning and environmental lawyer. You're an executive at Sustainable Cayman, right? And you have an educational background in concepts from sustainable development, along with ecology and wildlife conservation. What has drawn you into this line of work? Why are you so passionate about the environment?
Hi, so yes, I am an planning and environmental lawyer. I'm English qualified. I'm a solicitor, coming up to 13 years qualified now, so sort of mid-level. And yes, I specialised in planning and environmental law a number of years ago. And yeah, it's always been a passion for me. Not the law side of it. Obviously, as a child, you don't have a passion for the law. It is. Yeah. But as a child, I've always loved nature. I grew up in the countryside in a tiny village outside of a town in the UK. So the little village was called Roxwell. Shout out to Roxwell. Yeah, it was a beautiful little village in the middle of nowhere. And I was very, very close to nature. So I think appreciating that from a young age has sort of developed my interest in the area and led me down this sort of career path. But I've also always loved animals. Lifelong vegetarian, and in the last couple of years I've become fully plant-based. So I felt that, we can talk about that if you want to a bit later. But I felt that in my line of work, I just could no longer support the industries that I was.
Well, hey, it's all
taking
about
to
food
court.
And farming and where your meals are coming from, right?
Sure.
That's a big part of the conversation of agriculture, really. Honestly.
I think so, and I think with the interest in nature and the environment and animals and climate change and the environment and sustainability and general health, honestly. So, all of those sort of coincided and has led me down this path. I'm also, as you say, an executive officer for Sustainable Cayman, which is a charity on island focusing on sustainability and environmental awareness, biodiversity, all those great things. I also do a lot of other charity work as well. I'm a director of Kiwanis, and I help out at the crisis centre occasionally. Very busy. Been doing a few courses.
You're a person of the world, is what it sounds like. Aww. Helping humans and planet.
That's very kind, Bella. And as you said, I've done a couple of courses, sustainable development and ecology and wildlife conservation. So all of it ties together, and I feel like I'm on the right path.
I love that.
Yeah.
No, it seems that way for sure. Well, thanks. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Now, Demoy, so you are Senior Policy Advisor at the Ministry of, they see it has a bunch of different
Planning,
things.
Agriculture, Housing, Infrastructure.
That's the one. You are the Senior Advisor of the Portfolio for Agriculture, right? And you're originally from Jamaica.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so among other things, like being also a published author, I saw that. I'm going to have to read your book, sir. That looks very interesting. It's called, again?
Well, it's two books, Overcoming Our Giants, and the other one is Failure is Not Final.
Dang, that's pretty cool. Okay, cool. Well, apart from all of that, you find yourself advising the ministry. Has this always been a passion for you? How did you fall into this?
Well, agriculture has always been my passion. I went to an agricultural university. I studied general agriculture, agriculture production and food systems management. And after that, I did my master's in science education. I've done work in urban ecology and forestry in general. I did a stint at Beijing Forestry University where I looked at particularly the growing of bamboo as a forest type. And urban ecology practicing in New York and Chicago, looking at the context of how do we build out this space with greenery in a strategic manner. So I would say that I'm blessed to be in the field
Mm-hmm.
from a child growing up on a subsistent farm.
Mm.
So I've always seen the practice and appreciate it, and studying has brought greater appreciation.
That's incredible. That's a lot. You're the perfect person to be advising on these things. It sounds like.
I'm privileged.
Yeah, okay, you're the
Yes, yes.
As we have a beautiful island here and beautiful history of agriculture, right? So let's start with Anna. What do you think some of the effects on nature are that you would like to see reduced from farming? So the effects of farming on nature that you'd like to see reduced. What are some?
Sure. So generally speaking, intensive agriculture, industrial sort of sized farming. But of course, we don't have that in the Cayman Islands. So generally speaking, I mean, the bigger, the more intensive, generally the more harmful to nature and the environment and climate change. But of course, in the Cayman Islands, it's slightly different. So perhaps we could talk about that. I don't know later. But in general, certainly the intensive monocropping that we see, monoculture, the less diverse, the less, the more harmful it is on the environment. We want to see more biodiversity.
Okay.
And less monoculture and more polyculture, which means not just growing one crop in one place all the time. That's high risk. It's high yield while it works. But I think, with the overuse of fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers specifically, overuse of fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, they're damaging not just to the soils but to the air, because it causes air pollution and water pollution, the leachate that runs into the water systems and then ends up in the sea. So that has all different consequences, the sargassum bloom being one, fueled by overuse of fertilizers. I mean, fertilizers are great for, since the Green Revolution they were overused, but I think we definitely need to cut down on the use of particularly synthetic fertilizers.
Interesting.
And there are different ways of getting nitrogen back into the soil without using chemicals and synthetic inorganic products.
Are these the kind of things that we are using here right now? I don't know, Demoy, if you know the answer to that, or...
Well, as she mentioned, that agriculture is not done at a large commercial intensive level, that you'd see the kind of usage that would bring about the kind of effects, generally what you'd see in larger territories.
So we don't have that really here, the need for it either, right?
But what we need is for sustainable agriculture, sustainable farming, where you're not just having production, you're not just going for profit, but there's environmental stewardship, where they care for the environment. And from a ministry level, there are things that we are doing to ensure that is done. For example, ensuring that the right legislation is there. For example, we know that there are use of pesticide, and we have been without a pesticide regulation for some time. So there is the development now of Pesticide Control and Regulation Act, which we should see in not long from now, because it's a bill that is actively being worked on.
Wonderful.
And something that is being championed by the Honorable Minister Joanne Banks. So we are seeing that. We are looking at the practice of livestock farming. And one of the things we are doing is developing a new livestock development plan that will see the production of livestock and products from livestock done in such a way that we are not harming the environment while we are trying to make profit, but it's done in such a manner that the environment and ecology is protected at all levels. And how can we use native crops, crops that are grown here over a period of time, that have adapted to the environment and the conditions here, that we don't have to be using large amount of fertilizers, etc. And pesticides, at high toxicity level. How can we, as you said, break the culture of monocropping, which is not necessarily the case here, because what we have is mostly backyard gardens or backyard farming, few mid-sized farm, and the farmers here, what they do is plant a different type of a mix of crops. You find few straight farms. What you say straight farms, you mean whether it is a straight crop farm or a straight livestock farm. There's integrated farming systems.
So we have that.
Yes, we have that here.
Wonderful. And how can we use farming as a driver in the recovery of nature? I know it's kind of a weird question, but maybe we have biodiversity loss happening all the time here, right? Is there a way that maybe, this is literally just an idea, I just came up with it. Like, are we able to integrate that and somehow recover, like, our nature that way?
Yes, we can, and it is practicing sustainable agriculture,
Nice.
sustainable farming. How do we disturb less of nature? Well, we don't have high levels of tillage that will disrupt the soil, disrupt the soil structure, etc.
Tillage.
Yeah, so
Digging
using
it up?
arrows and plows, we don't have those large contiguous space of land where we can send a tractor for acres.
Right.
We don't have that.
We don't have that.
So we have small pockets of red moles, and with that you get minimal tillage. But what we ought to encourage, even though that's not the case, is cover cropping, not leaving the soil bared and disturbed, because what you have is erosion and runoff, and the good beneficial bacteria you want to encourage, which will cause breakdown and have the soil to absorb nitrogen in the form that it does in nitric oxide. That it can, but if you just till the soil and leave it bare, then you have an issue. But what we are seeing, one of the biggest effect, I think, is the use of pesticide, and that can bring long-lasting effect to the environment, especially if it is done over water lenses.
Right.
So this is what the scale of it is somewhat unknown based on lack of data, and this is why we are taking the step to ensure that there are legislation to govern how these pesticides are used, how they're handled, how they are distributed, how they are stored, and that the persons that are using them, they are trained, they are certified, and they are given that nod of approval by a entity that is so configured to ensure that these practices are adhered to.
Right. And for people who might not understand why pesticides are so harmful, this is one of the things that interests me a lot, is actually how pesticides work in our food web systems, right? So say if an insect was to be sprayed with a pesticide and then they got eaten by a bird, and then that bird got eaten by a bigger bird, which then maybe got eaten. I know we don't have bears here or anything, but like for the sake of it, a Cayman Islands bear, they got eaten. The buildup of pesticides inside the bodies of these animals builds to get to a level of toxicity where you can't survive anymore. And then somebody like a human might eat that, and then suddenly it's in our body. So it's a buildup of pesticides in the environment over water, many different ways that can cause a lot of issues that way. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Demoy said. I think if we can regulate herbicides, pesticides, overuse of fertilizers, all that stuff, I think we can minimize the harm to the environment. And I think, in terms of what we can do farming wise to sort of embrace nature and improve soil quality, diversification, absolutely. And as Demoy's already said, we just don't have those large monocrops in Cayman. Probably we don't have the space in Cayman. We just don't have the space for those huge single crops where they're just over-tilled and over-ploughed and just rinse of fertilizers and pesticides and all the chemical products as well. Inorganic materials ploughing into the land. And of course that also, over-tillage releases carbon into the atmosphere, whereas what we want to be doing is carbon fixing.
Right.
Soil brings carbon, draws down carbon from the atmosphere. So we want to encourage all of that. We want to work with nature rather than against it, embrace diversification of farming. So rather than things like a single crop, like monoculture, want to encourage oligoculture, polyculture, different things grown in the same space, or intercropping where you've got, or agroforestry, where we've got trees and different plants mixed in with the crops, all in the same space.
That's what I was thinking of, my little biodiversity.
Exactly. Increased biodiversity, and of course that would help the pollinators. We want more pollinators. We want biological diversity means more animals, more plants, microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, all of that, and it helps soil quality, helps the environment generally, helps draw down carbon, and it stops the runoff as well. Because I think, with desertification of soil, topsoil, we've lost so much topsoil in the last few decades, haven't we? It's just, to sort of critical levels. So we need to be protecting the soil. And the best way to do that is to diversify, mix things up. I'm just so glad that we don't, in the US, that's just how not to do it. It's dangerous. And I think also from a farmer's perspective, it's putting all your eggs in one basket with monoculture. Let's say you've just got an intensive dairy farm. We saw, was it last week, the week before, 18,000 cows went up in flames.
I know.
Just from
it's awful.
heartbreaking. But again, you know, it's heartbreaking for the animals, the environment, all that carbon, but also for the farmer. He's lost everything just in a single flash. So I think,
One of the things we have to talk about too as well is the control of invasive species. Because we're talking about fixing nature. When you look here in Cayman, we're talking about problems existing locally. What the iguanas have done, we're grateful for the program that government have put in place to manage them. But the feral chickens now is another argument, which is affecting local agriculture. I mean, destroying plant species.
Oh, is it?
Is it? And it is the proliferation of them and the rate at which they are breeding.
Yeah.
And so they have to be controlled, lest you are going to disrupt that balance.
Because it is all about balance, and it's
all
out of
about
whack
balance.
right now.
absolutely,
We have a lot of invasives here, don't we?
we sure do. But it is absolutely about balance. And I think, you know, with the diversification and permaculture, where you're working with nature, you're embracing or replicating or working with natural ecosystems, the way that they function, either have it there already and just work with it, or try and replicate that as best as possible, which is as diverse as possible.
So, question. So we don't do that mono type of crop here, right?
Not at any scale that should alarm anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so this kind of takes me to my next question, because right now, Cayman relies so heavily on shipping from other countries for food and resources that we want to become self-sufficient in terms of our food, right? So we're continuing to grow as a country. You know, our population is continuing to go up. Are we in an area where, to be able to sustain ourselves, if metaphorically we just had to cut off all shipping, if there was a hurricane, which there could very well be, and we have a situation where we don't have anything coming in, would we have to go to these mono type of farming to be able to support our country?
The truth is that no country is really food self-reliant.
Yeah. Okay.
Or should we say have total sovereignty, because of the needs of people. People dietary preferences are different. So as a country, you'll cater to those dietary preferences. What we need is that we are food secure. Food secure is that we have food at all times. People have access to the food, the preferences that they want. Yeah. So availability, access, and how we utilize the food. We have it, and it's stable. It's at a consistent. We have it when we want it. So the question is Cayman food secure?
Yes, and yes. How can we do that?
The truth is that we are food secure in a large point, because we can afford to buy what we want. However, that security is vulnerable, because, as you say, the ships should stop and we are importing over 82% of what we consume from one source.
That's a lot.
From one source.
From only one, too.
That is not total importation. There are importation from other sources. But what we are doing, what the ministry is doing, and the government is doing of the day, as one of its broad outcomes, is to bolster Cayman Islands food security. So tremendous resources have been put into agriculture, significant investment, and that is to develop programs such as a local cattle breeding program to bring in cattle that can resist the kind and naturally fit the kind of environment where we can improve the local genetics. It is to support backyard farming by providing grant support. It is to increase the capability of the agricultural society to better serve the local farmers, that they become more resilient. It is also to government to put in the different programs that can significantly increase agricultural production, that we can drive down importation to levels in certain commodities, because we'll, as I said, never truly be food sovereign because of our size, one, and what can grow within this area. But what are the crops that we can identify? We know that we do seasoned peppers. We know we do mangoes. We do avocados. We know we do the tubers, they grow here well, the cassavas, the sweet potato. How can we encourage the production of these to sustainable levels that we can drive down importation significantly? For example, the government of the day is driving a program called the National Egg Strategy, which seeks to increase the production of local table eggs
Oh,
by 100% over the next 4 years.
whoa.
But this is by sourcing the equipment that is needed and providing the different inputs to the farmers that will sustain production to the levels that are being targeted. And the program is going well. They have recruited a poultry specialist that is driving the science behind it. So it's not just producing, but in a scientific, well-researched way that will, as I said, minimize disruption to the environment, but you are getting the production, the farmers are getting the profit they so desire. So everybody is happy, and they are meeting the safety, the food safety, quality standards that the consumer can be confident, and the buyers and the distributors, they can be satisfied that what they are buying, it is not compromised and is of equal or greater, safety standards to that of where we are importing from.
And just to make it clear, because I actually have had some people ask this question, but we can't eat the chickens on the side of the road, right?
Well, I personally would encourage them to be eaten because we don't know what they have in terms of diseases or whatever.
Yeah.
But if they're in a controlled space, and what we use this word purged,
A purging.
purging, they can. I grew up eating these chickens.
Okay.
And the eggs, which is said to be much more nutritious than the ones that we have from the commercial layer birds.
Yeah.
So, but it has to be controlled.
Okay. Interesting. Do you have anything to add to that?
In relation to the food security.
Yeah, we rely so heavily on shipping.
Yeah, sure.
But what would it be an issue for us to then try and, if we were to, I think you explained it very well, but I don't know if you really have anything else to add.
I think I would add that I think COVID is a perfect example to show us how vulnerable and fragile our food supply systems are.
Yeah.
Food security is a thing. It's a big thing, and I think it's a delicate balance. There's no one simple answer because, as you said, Bella, in terms of the growing population, just globally, it's just growing exponentially, and we need to feed people. People need food, and the odd backyard farmer it's not going to cut it overall. But I think for Cayman, it would be absolutely brilliant if we've become a little bit more self-sufficient and more sustainable, rather than relying so heavily on imports, because of course that comes with the cost. It drives up the cost of prices with the import prices, and the global fuel prices are going up, which means production costs are going up, which means the end consumer price is increasing. So I think we're only going to ever pay more and more and more. It's just going to increase the costs. Plus, I think, like we said before, in America, in the States, they do heavily spray with. The land is heavily tilled anyway, so it's less nutritious. The soil is less nutrient dense, and the rhizosphere of the root zone of the plants, it's a delicate chemical balance, and I think anything can get that out of kilter. So I think we're importing foods from the US. It's not only it's expensive, it's a vulnerable supply chain, but also we're getting foods that are not only been sprayed with fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, but also then they're pumped with preservatives, because a lettuce is not meant to literally look the same 3 weeks later. That's not normal.
Right.
And the truth is that while if the more they're traveled, the more miles on the travel of the food, the more nutrient is lost.
Absolutely. It's true.
But let me just say that, and this is a big news break for Cayman, is that the cabinet has approved the Cayman Islands Food and Nutrition Security Policy. This has been a policy in the working for over a decade. So it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction to COVID why this policy came about.
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
Oh, it was already
so it was in the works. Persons can go on the government website, the Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing, Infrastructure page, and you can see the policy there. You can pull it down, read it, and we have a PR campaign that the ministry will be pushing. That will be, you'll see stuff about the policy. We will be ensuring that persons know what it is and what are the benefits to the Cayman and people, and it will be the overarching document that will drive agriculture in the jurisdiction for the next 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who is very much in touch with this whole agriculture situation and cares a lot about it. And she actually had a question for you guys as well that actually has to do with it's for the people, but what methods do you suggest to revitalize agriculture in Cayman that still include older generations? So the farmers that we see at farmers markets, instead of maybe our more fancy, as you know, primitive greens. We've had them on the podcast before, incredible stuff, but I'm not sure if that's well suited to the older generations. There's a lot of technology. Not that they couldn't do it. You can definitely teach old dogs new tricks. No way about that. But agriculture is such an important part of our heritage, so it's important to preserve that. Does that make sense? Like, how can we keep our older generations involved without losing them?
So just to give a little data, in 2015, there was a study done for the Food and Nutrition Security Policy. It revealed that Cayman, the average age of a Caymanian farmer is 55.
Okay.
So we take that 8 years have passed.
Yeah.
There has been no significant participation from the youth population in agriculture. So we could say that this average age might have moved up to 60.
Wow.
While this might sound high in other places, even America and Pennsylvania, their average age is 65. Australia have a higher average age. But we're not taking comfort. What we're doing from a ministry level is to introduce a program we call Youth in Agriculture Program.
Okay.
So we have provided grant funding to now introduce and support a national school garden program in schools, where we're providing $1,000 Cayman dollars to primary schools and $1,500 to high schools annually. Once they apply, the application form is there. Reach out to the ministry. We'll send you the package to support that. How can we make agriculture more innovative? And that's one of the mandate of this present ministry and what our minister have been driving, that we modernize, continue to modernize agriculture. Yeah. What are the inputs that are going to make the youth population, and not just youth, but what we are seeing is that there's a low participation from women. And this is not just Cayman, it's globally. So the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, FAO, they are driving that. So in most of our programs, for example, we have a land lease program that we are designing a policy. A part of that policy, and I'm being preemptive here, is that there will be portions of lands that will be designated just for women and youth.
Oh, wow.
So to ensure that we have participation and involvement and there's inclusion. And we know, for example, you mentioned primitive green, which we have seen where that vertical agriculture, that control environment agriculture, because of the level of innovation that is involved, the youths will gravitate to it. But there are other forms of agriculture which can give you, which are maybe not as cost prohibitive as that, which can involve youths. Precision agriculture, protected agriculture like your greenhouses, etc. So there are many different ways. Container farming. So there are different ways that can be used. And one of the things is that with YouTube and the proliferation of information is now available, you can basically access information anywhere. Personally, I know youths currently here that are doing hydroponics in their backyard, their houses. You know, so there's a lot being done. We're looking at different systems, for example, to growing fodder, animal feed, because all of it is imported, or most of it, maybe 98% from the US. How can we now look to grow fodder in hydroponics, you know, and stuff like that? So there's a number of things that we're looking at that over the years to come within this food security policy, we'll achieve the target of having a large exodus towards agriculture from our youth population.
Interesting. Do you have anything?
Oh, it's fantastic. I do. So I read the policy. I read the draft. I didn't know that that's been approved, actually. I didn't know that that's been approved in its final version. I think it's brilliant. Like, I think it says all the right things, and it's going in exactly the right direction.
I know. I'm going to have to I'm looking forward to reading that as well.
It's a brilliant read.
So, with having to now, we want to start providing things that we don't have to import. Does that mean that we're going to have a need for preserving lands for agricultural use? And what are the obstacles of that? Is that an issue? We can start either side, whoever feels comfortable.
So I think, like I said before, I don't think we should be clearing vast swathes of land for agriculture. That's not necessary just to clear everything out the way and till the land and just make it just
not
one
really a
thing.
solution.
Yeah, it's not. That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, the very definition of sustainable would be, can we keep doing something consistently at that level successfully? And the answer is no. Like, I mean, not here generally with farming techniques. So as Demoy's already said, innovation is really important, and a whole different approach, like a holistic approach. For example, if we can, I mean, this is a little bit idealistic, but if we can go back to indigenous peoples who were so knowledgeable and cared so much for their land and worked with nature to the extent that it worked for them. So if we look after the earth, it'll look after us.
Yeah.
So I think, innovation is really important, attracting young people to the industry. I mean, generally agriculture, as Demoy's already said, the average age is very high generally in most countries, because young people get attracted by technology and move to cities, that sort of thing. But innovation, I mean, I've been to primitive greens. I've looked around the container farms. Oh my goodness, mind blowing. I was so inspired. I think I said wow probably like every time I was shown something different. So meeting Cody and Kerry, and everything's controlled from the phone, the Wi-Fi, and they've got backup, and so I think innovation like that is key. I mean, of course, like Demoy's already touched on, that's cost prohibitive for a lot of people. The startup costs are really expensive with the technology, the heavy technology input. But as another example, aside from hydroponics, aeroponics, all futuristic things like that. It's futuristic to me anyway when I walk around. But also beacon farms. I've been to beacon farms. I had a tour.
Lovely model. Composting, reclaiming land.
I'm obsessed with that place.
It's beautiful.
And there's also the movie, which I would recommend, Beacon Farms at Kamana Bay Cinema, every Wednesday, 6:30.
Wonderful.
Oh, it's brilliant. So I learned so much, and
It's a great idea.
And they're fantastic. And obviously the benefit of that as well is it's creating jobs, and it's also keeping people busy and giving them a focus, because their employees are all recovering from addictions. So it's just a fantastic
Social
project. It really is just a fantastic project. Very inspiring.
Okay.
And they're setting aside some land for orchards, and they're doing exactly what I would love to see more farms doing. They're incorporating diversification. They're not just setting one area aside for this and then one area aside for that. They're mixing everything up. So you've got the papayas in with the dragon fruits, and then you've got the tobacco leaves right near the seasoning peppers.
Integrated farming.
Exactly. Integrated farming, diversification, nature-friendly, environmentally friendly, and they only use, and I'm not paid by them.
I was going to say.
This is not an ad, I'm not on commission.
We
but
just love you.
It's just, it's organic, so they don't use any synthetic or inorganic fertilizers or, fossil fuel-based fertilizers. They use organic, biological fertilizers, and some of them target, for example, only caterpillars, and they're fine because it goes up into the irrigation system. These pesticides, and they go up into the irrigation system, into the food produce, but it's absolutely harmless to humans. But it just targets caterpillars. Like I think it's called dipel, that one. But things like that, so it's and because they're not synthetic, they're organic. So it's from byproduct from bacteria, chemical processes like that. So it's all natural. I love to see it. And they're setting aside an area for orchards. They're doing sweet sop, sour sop, ackee,
Beautiful. It sounds
breadfruit. They're doing fantastic things there. I would really recommend a visit.
So these kinds of methods are, I guess, overcoming the obstacle of maybe using this land for just agricultural purposes, and now integrating it is one of the because we don't want to just knock it down, and knocking it down that's one of the obstacles, is the fall. What's the word? The risks you take with doing something like that to the land,
sure.
right? So you would agree that that's more futuristic things, and using these methods is a way to overcome them.
I agree. One of the cries of the farming community is access to more agricultural lands, land preserve agricultural lands.
Yes.
We cannot deny the fact that urban sprawl is increasing. So we are seeing more lands, whether they are marginal lands being converted or for housing, more lands are being used. It means there are less land available for agriculture. However, as Anna said, there has to be a mix of how we use the land. So it's not just a commercial purpose where we are going to go in and clear everything, but how can we, within these spaces, practice agriculture at minimal disruption, like what we are seeing at Beacon Farms, and reclaiming and what many farmers are practicing here too. One of the things is that we have to see the importance of backyard farm, backyard spaces. And this many backyard might have a 10 by 20 feet space at the back. That's a huge space. You can grow your condiments, you can grow your seasonings, you can grow tubers in. I saw this farmer, and he was growing sweet potato in tires.
That's cool.
And he reaped 30 pounds of sweet potato. So and it was like 3 car tires stuck together with soil in it. So what it's saying is that we do not need large acreage to have an impact at the home level.
Right.
And that's one of the programs that the government had did in COVID, which over 1,600 persons applied and were beneficiaries of the farmers grant. And that has spiked an interest where we had registered just over 500 farmers on island. Now we're over 926 farmers registered as a result of that program. So that's almost 100% increase.
That's really impressive.
So that is significant. That is when we shared that data with CARICOM, that was tremendous to have moved the interest of agriculture from having registered farmers of over 500 to over 900 persons.
Wow.
So there are things that are happening. And again, I go back to this policy because, as you said, it's a beautiful read, but it's a great document that once it is implemented, monitored and evaluated in the correct way, which the ministry, that is what it's focused on, it will produce the outcomes that it and the benefits to the people of the Cayman Islands.
So speaking a bit more about this, I read some of the draft questions that came from, I think, one of the meetings that you had, one of the public consultations. And so climate change has a potential to impact agriculture here in many ways, right? And if it isn't already doing so, I don't know if maybe you have some examples of it already doing so here. But how will the new food and nutrition policy align with sustainability and climate resilience from the get-go?
So again, is our farming practices. We have to ensure that minimal disruption or disturbance or effects are on the environment. It is to do things like what we see the National Tree Planting Program is doing. Plant trees which are able to sequester lots of carbon. It is how we move to more less carbon producing productions. For example, the growing of more small stock, what we call small stock, the growing of goats and sheep and stuff like that. Okay. Moving from a more focused cattle growing. And I know cattle is very dear to Cayman, and it should not be it's not an alarming level because we just have about less than 1,500 cattle on island. So that is not a lot. So we are not the ones that are causing the big problems within the bigger space.
What's the climate
but
change?
We are the ones that feel the effect in this region because, as you know, we have had over 23 hurricanes in the last 2 decades. And many of these, the intensity of it has disrupted our economy. Well, not Cayman to a large scale, but when you quantify the effect of them, it's more than some countries' GDP. But it has to be that from a technical support standpoint, from ministry, from the Department of Agriculture, that we continue to provide ways in which that are climate friendly, what we call climate smart agriculture, more precision-based agriculture. We are not just, for example, irrigating. There's a limited supply of fresh water in the world. Not just doing wholesale watering, but how can we provide the water to the direct needs of the plant, at the root of the plant, and not watering where no water is needed.
Yeah.
How can we maximize the use of mulch and stuff like that to retain moisture? How can we reduce, as again, tillage? How can we use less high grazing systems that are going to provide more opportunities for soil erosion? How can we increase ground cover cropping, that sort of a thing? So it's farmer education. It's having these farmer field schools where we're going to teach, having centers of excellence develop where they can come to see and they can go back to practice, that sort of a thing.
Right, and that will allow us to advance our agricultural technologies and will allow, I guess, our farmers a spot on the global market rather than just and the entire region, right? That's which is, I think, what we're going for, right?
I think so too. And yeah, so going back to the land clearance, and that all ties in with the policy all going in the same direction. But in terms of land clearance, we should definitely avoid clearing trees and mangroves. If we have to clear other land, then less precious resources, if you can say it like that, but certainly not trees and mangroves because of the carbon sequestration. And but also they stabilise the soils, protect us from hurricanes and storm surges, all of that. All the benefits of mangroves, of course, and the transpiration from the leaves and the nurseries, and oh my gosh, the list goes on with mangroves.
Well, it actually brings me on to a question that I actually have for you, Anna, as I know Demoy be able to respond to this one. But our central mangrove wetlands are a really important meteorological source for agriculture. We have our big old clouds, that tunnel of clouds that comes from our mangrove that holds that rain that comes from our central mangroves.
Absolutely.
So how do you think that maybe this east-west arterial road could affect it if it goes ahead?
Yeah, sure. So, I understand the Demoy. It's slightly conflicted.
After you finish, I'm going to add a point to it.
Okay.
So I mean, there's no sort of one. There's not only one answer to this. But yeah, with the benefits of mangroves, I'm sure that I know that you've had Cass.
Yes, Cass.
So she's been on and that she does amazing things with the mangrove rangers and Martin, and we lay as part of my role with Sustainable Keman and with Melanie Carmichael, who heads up the organisation charity, and we work closely with the mangrove rangers, who Martin McKee, he's just the mangrove man. He knows everything about mangroves, and Cass does as well. So so mangroves, they protect us from storm surges, they protect us from the winds, they stabilise the ground, they stabilise coastal ecosystems. They are a nursery for the birds and insects and sharks and fish and all life. So we should avoid taking mangroves out if we possibly can. And with the East-West Arterial Road, and going back to what you were saying about the transpiration from the leaves, and it produces much of the rainfall in the west side of the island here, because it comes up from the central mangrove wetlands, moves across with the prevailing winds from the east, the Atlantic, and then dumps it on Georgetown and West Bay. So, we get a lot of the rain from the mangroves. If we can, with the central, the East-West Arterial Road, I would love to see something done like they did in the Keys, Florida, and the Everglades and the Keys, where they've done a raised road. Yeah. So it's like almost like a boardwalk, but for a raised road. I mean, I absolutely appreciate that. The costs are phenomenal. Yeah. It's really, really expensive to do.
But is it worth it?
Yeah, because it's a sort of dichotomy. You've got on the one hand, it really
is. Have a real problem of traffic, etc.
And no one wants to sit on the road for 2 hours. I absolutely get that. What should be a 20-minute journey from Savannah, or half an hour from Boston, 2 hours. That's just unsustainable.
There has to be a balance.
There absolutely is, and there is a need for a road. There is everyone's sitting in that traffic for an hour and a half, 2 hours every morning from North Side, East End, Bodden Town, Savannah, Newlands. It's horrendous. But setting your alarm, an hour or two earlier than you need to, just so that you can sit in that mundane nose to nose traffic, nose to top tail traffic. Is just horrendous. So there is a need for a road, clearly, but also we want to mitigate the effects of climate change and become more resilient. So what we don't want to do is pour concrete on everything, take out the mangroves that protect our islands, and then pour concrete, because that would increase the flooding risks. And also it takes out the mangroves, which also increase flooding risks. You've got an impermeable surface, and then you take out the coastal protection from the mangroves. You've seen those, I'm sure everyone listening will have seen those mangrove simulators where you've got the sea and then the bank and then the mangroves and then inland. And then when you do the sort of push the waves, we've all seen, I think, those simulators to show the buffer of the mangroves. So I think I would love to see at least either a diversion, if we can't build a road above them, like a raised, I don't know what you call it, like a flyover type thing. The engineering that goes into that is very complex, and it comes with its own issues. I understand that, and the clearance in order just to do that would, inevitably some mangroves will be removed. It's a fine balance. So, if we can't build a raised road, then at least if we can steer away from the central mangrove wetlands as much as humanly possible. And I understand the human need. It's the same with agriculture, the growing population, we need to feed people.
Exactly.
There's, we're importing people and cars onto this island at a very fast rate. It's probably unsustainable at the moment, unless we cap the number of cars but I mean, of course, with the public transport, I'm all about that. Well, I use the buses as much as I possibly can, but I understand there are limitations. It doesn't go into Newlands, and
always on time,
yeah,
all sorts of stuff.
absolutely. And we need a schedule. We need a centralised bus service that's reliable. So certainly public transportation, but just I think building an extra road off of what's already there and then feeding into the same bottleneck at Hurley's, Grand Harbour. Like overall, the journey time to Grand Harbour will probably be reduced. But overall, if you're coming from East End, Bodden Town, North Side, Savannah, anywhere east of Grand Harbour, I think you've still got to get through that bottleneck. So that's one of the main issues we need to solve. I don't have I'm not.
No. That's your opinion.
I'm not an engineer.
It, so.
I'm not a specialist. I'm not a roads expert.
Yeah.
But just in my opinion, that bottleneck needs to be solved before. At least at the same time, because otherwise we're not going to achieve anything at all. And we're just going to destroy mangroves and have more cars.
Mangroves, which then in turn hurts our agriculture.
100%.
Right.
And I think it's a proven track record globally that if we build more roads, we're just going to get more cars.
That's true.
It's just a snowballing effect.
Right.
It's a really, really difficult one. I obviously absolutely understand that people do not want to be sat in 2 hours of traffic.
Right.
For a journey that takes 25 minutes or something. But at the same time, can we do it in a way, let's get a new road in the least harmful
path
path possible.
Sustainably into the future, right?
Absolutely. I think sustainability, and I think just if we can stay clear of the mangroves.
I love that.
I'm very obsessive mangroves.
I love that. Thank you for that.
Just leave the mangroves.
Demoy, what was your point on that?
Yeah, I made it that there has to be a balance, just as with farming, where it has to be sustainable. So, but the cries of the people, that's one thing that government have to address, and the cries of the environmentalists and the lobbyists is something that will have to be heard. And I'm confident that whatever solution that will be taken, there will be one, and so as I said, I stay away from this subject because I'm not a subject area specialist.
And I must say likewise as well. Full disclosure, I am no engineering expert, but
okay,
it's a really difficult one, and I really don't envy the position of politicians.
I was about to say, I really happy I'm not in charge.
I'm glad I'm not the decision maker in this, but I think every voice needs to be heard.
Yes.
People sitting in traffic, the environmentalists, everyone.
Of course.
I think it's just a fine balance. Same with nature, same with agriculture. Yeah. Everything is a very, very delicate balance. And I think, just one other point I wanted to make on the land clearance.
Sure.
So with Beacon Farms, like they've got this new Italian rock crushing machine, a Valentini. So we're obviously on a rock. It's the trench and the ridge, the Cayman Ridge. So we're mainly situated on rock, which is not fertile. So in order to make fertile soil for agriculture, what they've got is this very, very advanced rock crusher. So it's a great piece of technology, and it doesn't damage the land. It just crushes up the rock. And then into a fine powder, which also has nutrients in it. But of course, you can't plant things in rock. So together with the fine powdered rock, they mix it with
manure,
compost and
etc.
organic fertilizers to make a nutrient dense soil.
Wow, that's super cool.
And it's very innovative, and they're lending that machine to other farmers who would like to do the same thing. And otherwise, it's just too difficult to find an area unless you're planting in a greenhouse or something. So again,
it's about innovation and using
absolutely
kind of the space you almost already have and the things
absolutely
you already have.
And as well, ring fencing from pests. We were talking about the chickens, and at Beacon Farms you can literally see all of the, they've got agoutis and peacocks and chickens and all sorts of pests, and just ring fence that off. But all in a if we can diversification, intercropping, all of that good stuff mixed with protecting the land but not clearing the mangroves, and crushing rock is just such a fantastic way forward. Mixing it with compost, and they use brown and green waste and cardboard to make the compost that they mix in with the powdered rock and the fertilizers.
So interesting. That's such a cool, innovative way.
Yeah, it's and then I think if a lot of farmers, I think as Demoy's already said, backyard farming is for sure the way forward.
And that's actually my next question is actually about backyard farming. And the question was, would you recommend people start their own backyard farm? But I feel like now that is definitely a recommendation, right?
We're both going to say
the gains of it is well known, well researched. I've been in a economy before where backyard caused the sector to grow by 30%. Backyard
Wowzers.
farming, the promotion of backyard farming. And it's not just the effect on GDP, but it's the effect on the quality of life and what you consume. You know what you're eating. They're nutrient rich because you are doing it. You know, you are using less pesticide. The food is less traveled. You know, so the impact of it is great, and it doesn't take any great science to do it. You know, because insects, pests tend to be drawn to something in a large volume. So when you go and disrupt an area and acres and you plant, remember that insects were there before you came.
Exactly.
So what you're calling pests, it's their home. However, there is a multiplication of those. And even use pesticide, it's well known that at least 5% of the population will not die.
Yeah.
And they are going to resurge. And the pesticide that you use will not have any impact on them, or little or no impact. So backyard gardening has to be, in the Cayman context, one of the ways in which we can achieve high levels of food security. And it's something that every home should be on board. It should be a part of, if it's not, housing policies. If not, persons who are building these communities should leave space for community garden. As I mentioned earlier about that, I practice urban ecology. And when you look into the New York context, Chicago, these are big municipalities, large cities. We're seeing where they're doing rooftop gardening. We're seeing where they're doing community gardens, where churches are getting involved, using spaces. I went to this place in Gary, Indiana, where there were blights. And you know, it was one of the heavy steel production towns or cities. Yeah. And a lot of lands were left with blights. And we saw where the community went in and they started to do little orchards with these lands, and a lot of food producing, and then they give it to the people in the community. So there has to be ways in which the churches, the community as a whole, the community groups come together, and now we can use different plots that are left bare. How can we now grow particular crops and feed our people, reduce the food bill significantly?
And this will bring the price of
definitely
this kinds of
Definitely.
stuff down. Because
bill.
right now, people, I go buy a cucumber and I'm like selling my arm. Right? Stuff
no.
like that.
You end
If
up
you can
choosing
grow
from
your
one thing to
pepper,
the other, don't you?
your thyme, your scallion, you can grow your callaloo, your bok choy, pak choy, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
It means that you don't have to buy that.
Exactly.
You're providing your greens, you're providing, your condiments, your spices, etc. The only thing you can grow is your rice.
Right.
And people are not eating much rice anymore either
Right.
way. But there are things that you can do. You can do your tubers to provide healthy starch, which another problem within the Cayman space is the high levels of obesity and what is considered overweight, which puts a significant dent on health care.
Yes.
And this policy seeks to address not just food, but also nutrition,
Yeah.
because that's a big elephant in the room that must be discussed and talk about, if not here, but certainly in other spaces.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think, backyard farming, it's just got so many benefits. And health,
Therapeutic.
exactly as you had.
I was going to say mental health is
Mental
a big part
health.
too.
It really is. Nature is proven to be good
Yes.
for the mental health. Being in nature and growing your own thing, you know what's in it. There's nothing nasty in it. You've seen it grow. And in fact, when I went to the hydroponics farm with Kerry and Cody, they were saying all the kids, they do school trips there. And they would normally, sort of turn their nose up at salads and things, but they're loving it. They're all eating the leaves off the off the vertical hydroponic walls, and they love it. They literally, and Cody will say it's amazing. It's got only good stuff in it, and it tastes like the best lettuce in the world. And all the kids eat it, and they go, "That's amazing." And obviously, they would never normally eat lettuce.
Yeah.
So I think just raising that awareness, and I think with the younger generation, watching things grow and having an input into that, it sort of educates, but also it's
And
great.
spur the interest. It
Yeah,
was
it's
from
spur the interest in.
living on a subsistence farm where I practice agriculture.
Yeah.
I taught my daughter to count, to identify colors from my backyard garden.
Really?
Brilliant.
So there's it's multidimensional. The benefits of it
Yeah.
is unimaginable.
And like Demoy already said, even if it's on a very, very, very small scale,
Yeah.
I mean, just even growing one herb, basil, anything, one herb yourself, or a little trough, or a little allotment, you can scale up. And of course, there are loads of backyard farms.
And it's
aren't there?
fixing
The
carbon
farmers
too.
market.
Some amount
It
of
literally
carbon.
is.
This is all a big win-win.
And and it's lowering
clearing
our
your hair,
personal, because obviously in the Caribbean, like Demoy's already said, from our agriculture, we don't produce too much carbon because there's just not big cattle ranches and big crops and soil tilling, all that harmful practices. So in terms of our agriculture, we don't give off too much carbon. But we feel the effects of climate change, but we're not the biggest emitters of carbon. However, our overall carbon footprint per capita is not good. Like we've got 5 times the global average of, but I mean, apart from anything, we can't, there's some things we can't do about that. Being a small island, of course, we need to import a lot. So that's going to raise our carbon footprint quite a lot. But if there's any possible way, even a little way that we can reduce our carbon footprint per capita, let's do it.
By just having your own little backyard situation going on.
I mean, I would say grow your own hydroponics. They do their starter
They're
kits.
quite expensive.
They're so expensive. I'm sorry, ALT. But ALT, I've got $160 for a tiny starter kit to grow a couple little basil. I thought, as much as I love hydroponics.
There are other ways to start.
But in fact, I feel like everyone's done it in a sense, because when you run out of lettuce and you clip the end and it sort of grows back, you just stick it in a glass of water, or your celery wilts, or the end, and you just stick it in, it grows. That's hydroponics.
Yeah, exactly.
To a very, to a very basic level.
In a soilless medium.
Exactly.
Well, awesome, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this really shows people how interconnected all these things are together, how the environment's connected to agriculture. Agriculture's connected, obviously, to health and nutrition, but that's connected to climate change, and like how we're like a big tree. That's how I see the universe is. We're all a big tree and a branch off of it. So kind of to close us out here, if people want to get involved, if people want to find the policy, is it out to be read now? Can you go read it? Okay, where can they find that? So
it's to go on the CIG website, Cayman is a government website, and on the page for Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure, and you can see the policy and you can read it. You can email the ministry. You can email myself, demoy.nash@gov.ky. I'll forward the policy. Also, to say that there is a public relation campaign that is going to start in short order, so you'll see a lot about the policy, a proliferation of information in the space about the policy. Wonderful. It's something that is here to stay for the next 15 years. So stand by to be soaked with information.
Wonderful. So that's where you can go to get more information about that. And I will add links to that in the show notes of today's episode. And guys, thanks so much. It seems like the best way for people to get involved is to be aware of what they're eating, be aware of their diets, try and start their own little backyard farm.
Shop local.
Which
market.
You can do here at the farmer's market, right?
Foster's, Kirk's even.
They
even have local produce.
Right?
But the farmer's markets.
Or you can go to Beacon. Does Beacon have?
Yeah, they do. They have a little farm shop.
Okay, you can go there. And we have a wealth of farms here on island, really, that you can go. I'll add some down also in the show notes. So thanks, guys, for coming out today and for talking to me about this.
Pleasure has been mine, Bella.
Absolutely.
Night has been a pleasure.
Likewise, Demoy, Bella. And another little tip, if anyone is even interested in just a little bit in what we've been talking about today, there's a really good documentary on Netflix. It's called Kiss the Ground. Oh, I'd really recommend it.
Kiss the Ground.
It basically covers everything we've talked about today.
Oh, wonderful.
And
okay.
especially with the, COP15 and biodiversity and 30 by 30, all of that. It touches on all of the subjects that we've talked about today.
I'm going to go and watch that.
It's brilliant. It's just about an hour and a half, and it talks about everything that we just talked about today. So
okay, wonderful. I'll also add that down below for people.
It was a real pleasure to come with you, Demoy, today.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
I love it, guys. Thank you. And thank you again to DMS Broadcasting and Bubble 89.1 and my pal Ryan Kirklady at Retrospekt Media for capturing all of this. Sustainable Cayman is a nonprofit organization promoting conservation and environmental sustainability to create a flourishing natural environment and healthy communities. You can follow them on Instagram at SustainableKY and Facebook at sustainable.cayman. And thank you to them for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Also, make sure to check out their Facebook group called Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives. They have a jingle competition going on right now, and you can win some big bucks. So go check that out and make a contribution. And you can also check out our other filmed episodes over on YouTube. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Protecting Paradise KY. And remember that you cannot care about these things unless you know about these things. Toodles!